everyone and welcome. I'm Renata, I'm the librarian at the Fairway Library, and today we are going to make these beautiful decorative terracotta pots. To make these pots, what you will need is the terracotta pot, white acrylic paint, 1 or 2 decorative napkins. They can be inexpensive napkins you can get at the dollar store, Mod Podge, medium and small paint brushes, scissors, water, and optionally you may want an X-Acto or craft knife. Okay, let's get started. So we're going to start with the white acrylic paint and the terracotta pot. So we're going to paint the portion where you're putting the napkin white, which I'm just going to paint the bottom, because if I don't paint this, then I can continue to hold on to it while I work with it. So we're going to paint the bottom white where we're putting the napkin, because the white will prevent any of the orangish color from showing through if your napkin is a lighter color, and it'll just make it more vivid and look nicer. So let's go ahead and paint this pot. I'm not going to do it super thick because I want it to dry a little bit faster, but thick enough that it's completely coated. I'm also going to make sure I get a little bit over the edge, because we're going to go a little bit over the edge with the napkin. And then once we're done, we're going to give it about 30 minutes to 2 hours to dry. Just make sure it's thoroughly dried before you start doing the Mod Podge. Okay, next, let's move on to our napkin. Now, it doesn't really matter what napkin you get. They do not have to be expensive napkins. Most napkins have layers, and we just want the top layer on this. We want to pull off the white layer on the bottom. So let's see here. So I'm having a little trouble getting it apart. There's a trick. If it doesn't come apart easily, you can take a piece of tape and stick it to the back, and then you can pull up the top layer. You should be able to pull that apart pretty easily. Like I said, these are not super expensive napkins. Just find something that you like the pattern. And then now we're going to see if 1 or 2 napkins are needed for our pot. Okay, now that our pot is dry, the next step is we want to lay our napkin on here so that we can see what direction we want it to go. We can see if it's large enough to wrap all the way around the pot, or do we need a second napkin in order to cover the entire pot. So what I'm going to do is take this in the direction that I know that I want it to go. And I know this is the corner that I want to use right about here. I'm going to hold that on there where I want it and smooth this around the pot as if we were gluing it down. You can see that it covers the pot. You can also see I ended up with excess napkin, which is fine. We'll take care of that later. But mine completely wraps around the pot. If it hadn't wrapped around the pot, if we'd come up short, then we would have just added a second napkin to this just to fill it. So now that you've done that, we'll do our next step. Okay, now let's go ahead and add our napkin. So what we're going to do is take your brush, your Mod Podge, and we are going to add a thin layer of Mod Podge. And it doesn't have to be, well, you don't want it very thick. And you're not going to coat the whole pot at once because Mod Podge dries pretty quickly. So we are going to take our napkin and add it just like we did in our practice run. And just kind of smooth it down. Top of there. Looks like I could have gotten a little bit more up here. So let's go ahead and do that. Right there. Okay. And now we're just going to do a little bit as we go. Slowly coating the pot. And then smoothing the napkin around. Making sure you're getting to the top, the bottom, as you go around. Just gradually smoothing it as you go. Now, if your napkin covers like mine does, then you just wrap. Just keep wrapping. If you wanted to end it here, you could trim off some of the excess. It doesn't have to be exact or real close. You can just trim that off. I kind of want the rest of that design, so I'm going to continue a little bit farther. If you had to use an extra napkin, you just layer that in the area that wasn't covered. And once again, you can just trim off the excess, and you can do it loosely. It doesn't have to be exact, because we're going to glue over this and it'll flatten it down. At this point, we're going to trim some of the excess off the bottom, because we're going to work with the bottom next. So we can, just like before, it doesn't have to be exact. You're not going to see the bottom. All right, so now we're going to take our Mod Podge and just try to get in here so that we can get that bottom wrapped around there. We're just going to flatten that down. step is we're going to put a thin coating of Mod Podge over the top of your pattern, of your napkin. So from here, we can just start coating it. Like I said, not too thick. It's a layer of glue and it will take a long time to dry if you put it on very thick. Don't worry if it, like mine right now, looks very white. When it dries, it'll be clear. And depending upon the type of Mod Podge you're using, if you have Mod Podge that's gloss, it'll have a glossy finish. Mine has a matte finish. Okay, now we are going to give it a little time to dry, and then I will show you how to trim the excess off from around the top. Okay, for our final step, we're going to trim the excess off the top. If you have an X-Acto or a craft knife that you'd like to use, that is an option. You can just trim it, but I'm going to show you a way that I preferred to do it. So what you do is you take a paintbrush, one of the small ones, you want a fine tip on it, and some water. And what you'll do, get the paintbrush wet, and then just get it a little damp, not much, just a little damp right where you would like to rip it. Just a bit, and that's just enough to make it tear easily. So you just do it a little bit at a time. Like I said, not very much at all. You get it too wet, then you might not be able to rip it right where you want. And then you just continue all the way around until it's all removed. So the only final step you might want to take is under here where you just took off all the extra. You might want to put another little thin coat of Mod Podge, not on the rest of the pot, so that it can dry. Once you've done that, if you want to use it for real flowers, you'll want to use a sealer so that you can water the flowers and not damage your design. You'll want to use a sealer on the inside and on the outside. You'll want to let the Mod Podge dry for probably a couple of days before you do that. But there you have it, your beautiful decorative pot. And don't forget, once you've made your pot, you should come into the library and check out our seed library where you can get some seeds to take home with you.